So I always thought I remembered Mafia. The cars, the music, the accents.
What?
Paulie being loud, Sam being quiet, Salieri being Salieri. That was the memory. Just another mob game, good characters but generic story, and some of the worst gunplay I've ever suffered through on a controller. Which, that was fine. I liked it for what it was. It was just a vibe. A nice little mob movie you could basically play through, complain about the shooting, and then move on. But then I went back and I saw it completely differently. It's kind of funny how memory works. The stuff I thought I'd remember, the big shootouts, the action set pieces, the final hit, none of it really stuck. What saved me this time was Tommy, the quiet, conflicted guy at the center of all the noise. A guy who never really fit the life, but stuck with it anyways. And then I realized, Mafia isn't about crime. I'm joking, by the way, that's a reference to the GTA 5 video. But still, it isn't technically only about crime. It's about what crime does to people who were never meant to be criminals. It's about the price of staying loyal in a world that doesn't reward it. This game doesn't beat you over the head with its strategy. It just lets it creep in, mission by mission. It starts with Tommy driving a cab through the city that feels a little too real, and then it ends with him dying in front of his lawn. Not because he was dangerous, not because he was ambitious, but because he tried to leave. That's what changed me on this replay. I stopped looking at Mafia as a story about the mob and started seeing it as a story about a man who didn't know how to walk away. Tommy's not Nico Bellic. He's not driven by revenge or guilt or war. He's just tired. Tired of being poor, tired of being invisible, tired of living a life where nothing changes unless someone else says so. And one night, he gets a way out. Not the right way, but a way. He steps into the world of Salieri's crew not because he wants to, but because it's the only option that he has left. And once you're in, you're in. There's no contract, no ceremony, just expectation. And the first expectation is you stay loyal. That word comes up a lot in Mafia, loyalty. It's treated like currency, something you give, something you spend, and eventually, something you lose. But the truth is, no one in the story really knows what loyalty is. For Paulie, it's friendship. For Sam, it's hierarchy. For Salieri, it's control. And then for Tommy, it's a little more complicated. Because Tommy spends the entire game stuck between being loyal to the people who helped him, and loyal to the version of himself he's trying not to lose. And no matter which side he leans towards, someone always pays for it. That's what Mafia is really about. Not the shooting, not the missions, not the cars or the clothes or the accents. It's about the tension between survival and conscience, and how choosing one over the other always has a cost. I'm not going to go over the mechanics. The shooting's rough, aim assist is borderline mandatory if you're using a controller, and there are frame drops throughout the game, but all that fades into the background when a game is this honest about what it's trying to say. Because Mafia might be dressed like a gangster story, but it plays out more like a quiet tragedy. One where you already know how it ends. You're just watching to see how long Tommy can hold on before everything slips away. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. Not the mob, not the guns, not the action, but Tommy, Paulie, Sam, Salieri, and what happens to each of them when loyalty stops being a virtue and becomes a death sentence. Tommy isn't special. He's not the best shot, he's not the smartest, and he's not chasing power. He's just a guy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what makes him believable. He feels like someone you might actually know. Someone who gets caught up in something he doesn't fully understand until it's too late. And when you really look at him, his story isn't about loyalty or crime at all. It's about dignity, about trying to keep your hands clean when the whole world's covered in dirt. The first few missions make that clear. Tommy doesn't want to be in the mob. He's a cab driver. He drives because he's good at it. It's simple work, predictable. You pick people up, you drop them off, you get paid. But one night, that simplicity disappears. Two men, Paulie and Sam, crash into his life, and in one night, he goes from being a driver to being a getaway driver. And that's the first time we see Tommy's version of honor. He doesn't help them because he's brave. He helps them because they ask and because saying no could get him killed. It's survival, not courage, but when you live in a city like Lost Heaven, these two things start to look the same. The next morning, he goes to work like nothing happened. That's who Tommy is. He keeps his head down, pretends he's fine, and tries to live like everything's still normal. But honor doesn't mean much when the world refuses to leave you alone. Morello's men show up, smash his cab, and remind him that good intentions don't pay for repairs. That's when Tommy breaks the first rule he set for himself. He fights back. He runs to Salieri's, looking for help, and by the end of the night, he's got blood on his hands and an open invitation to join the family. He could have walked away, but how do you walk away when a man just saved your life and offered you a seat at the table? That's the trap. Salieri doesn't recruit with fear. He recruits with gratitude. Tommy then convinces himself it's temporary. He tells himself he's doing what he has to survive, but survival has a way of becoming routine. Before long, he's doing collections, then hits, then full-blown assassinations, and every time he tells himself the same lie, I'm still me. But he's not. Each job chips away at him. You can hear it in his voice, the quiet hesitation before he pulls the trigger, the way he looks away after. Tommy doesn't enjoy violence, he endures it. And that's where the honor comes in. He wants to believe that doing bad things for good reasons still makes him a good man, but honor doesn't work like that. Once you start crossing lines, it gets hard to see where they even were. He's constantly trying to make a moral act feel moral. He draws a line, steps over it, then draws another one even further away. He's not blind. He knows exactly what's happening. He just keeps pretending he can live with it. It's easy to say Tommy should have left earlier, but honor to him isn't about pride. It's about consistency. He made a choice and now he's stuck with it. He keeps his promises even when the promises keep destroying him. That's what separates him from everyone else in the family. Polly's reckless, Sammy's pragmatic, but Tommy, he's the only one who still believes that being decent has value even when it doesn't. He spares people when he really shouldn't. He questions orders he's supposed to follow. He hesitates when others wouldn't. And every time he does, you can see a bit more of his old life disappearing. He wants to believe there's a way to live by some code, that you can kill for money and still be honorable if you're doing it for the right reasons. But the illusion starts to fade the once Salieri sends him after someone who doesn't deserve it. Because there's a difference between being loyal and being obedient. Tommy doesn't understand that yet, but he will. And when he finally realizes that Salieri's version of honor is nothing more than control dressed up in respect, it's already too late. That's what Mafia captures so perfectly to me, the slow decay of a man's self-image. Tommy doesn't lose his soul all at once. He trades it piece by piece for comfort, for safety, for belonging. And by the time he notices the cost, he's too deep to turn back. He starts the story as a cab driver just trying to earn a living, and he ends it as a killer trying to convince himself he's still the same man behind the wheel. That's what honor looks like in Lost Heaven. Not chivalry, not nobility, just survival, pretending to have principles. Polly's a character that you laugh at until you don't. He talks too much, drinks too fast, and he's the comic relief for most of the game. Always cracking jokes, always making a mess, but if you pay attention, really pay attention, you start to notice something underneath all that noise. He's terrified. Polly doesn't talk because he's confident. He talks because he doesn't know who he is when the things get quiet. He wants to matter, to be remembered for something other than being the sidekick to better men. You get the feeling that Polly's been chasing that his whole life. Not power, just validation. And that's why his version of honor is so warped. For Polly, honor isn't about dignity or restraint. It's about loyalty to his friends because they're the only people who ever gave him a seat at the table. He looks up to Tommy. He looks up to Sam, even Salieri to some extent, though he's too jaded to admit it. But under all that admiration is a desperate need to be seen. And to me, that's what makes Polly such a heartbreaking character. Because the longer the story goes on, the more you realize he's not built for this life. He's reckless, he's emotional, and worst of all, he's honest. There's this moment where he tries to joke about how little money they actually make. He shrugs it off like always, but you can hear the edge in his voice, the bitterness, the realization that after all the blood and broken bones, he still has nothing to show for it. And when the final job comes around, the big heist, you can see it in his eyes. This is it. His last shot at meaning something, not because he's greedy, but because he's tired of being overlooked. And so, he does what everyone in the story eventually does. He breaks his own rule. Polly's rule is simple. Don't go behind the family's back, but the family stopped looking out for him a long time ago. So he rolls the dice, plans the job, takes the risk, and he pays for it with a bullet. Not in some big dramatic shootout, not in a noble last stand, just gone, off screen, like he was never there to begin with. And that'll stick with you, because Polly believed there was still honor among thieves. He thought his loyalty would protect him. He thought he mattered enough to be spared, but in the end, he was a loose end, a problem to be cleaned up. There's no funeral, no tribute, no justice. Tommy finds him lying on the floor, face down, like a drunk who passed out too early, and in that moment, everything changes because if Polly, the guy who never stopped believing in the crew, can end up like that, then none of this means anything. That's the real tragedy of Polly. Not that he dies, but that he dies thinking he did everything right. That if he just stayed loyal, just stayed close to the people he trusted, things would work out. He was wrong, but he wasn't stupid. He just believed too hard in something that was never built to protect him. And the worst part, you get it. You get why he rolled the dice, why he thought this time would be different, why he let himself believe that honor still existed in a world that had proven over and over that it didn't. Polly's the cautionary tale no one listens to until it's too late. The guy who gives everything and gets nothing. The one who reminds you that being loyal in this life doesn't make you a hero, it makes you vulnerable. He wanted brotherhood. He wanted to feel like he mattered. But Mafia doesn't reward belief, it punishes it. And when Polly dies, it's not just a loss of a friend. It's the death of whatever hope Tommy was still holding on to. After that, nothing really feels stable. Everyone's a suspect. Every promise feels rehearsed. Polly was loud, messy, unpredictable, but he was also real. And when that's gone, all you're left with are the men who know how to stay quiet. Men like Sam, men like Salieri, men who survive but don't live. Now, if Polly's the guy who believed too much, Sam's the contrasting guy who stopped believing a long time ago. He doesn't talk unless he has to, really. He doesn't crack jokes, doesn't look shaken when things go sideways. He's steady, solid, unshaken. The kind of guy you want to sit next to you in a crisis. Until you realize he's also the kind of guy who can pull the trigger and not flinch. Sam doesn't act out of emotion. He acts out of alignment. With the structure, with the code, with whatever Salieri decides is right that week. And in this story, that's what makes him terrifying. See, Sam doesn't think he's betraying Tommy. He thinks Tommy betrayed the family. And in this world, those two things aren't the same. To Sam, honor isn't personal, it's institutional. You follow the chain, you do what the boss says, you don't question it because that's a job. Even if it means killing someone you fought beside for years. Even if it means putting a bullet in the only guy left who might have actually cared about you. And it's definitely not that Sam hates Tommy, it's far from it. There's a moment before the final confrontation, right before the betrayals fully unfold, where you can see it on Sam's face. He's tired, but he's resolved. Not because he wants to do it, but because he has to. And that's what's chilling. Sam thinks he's the one still doing it right, the loyal one, the soldier who stuck to the plan when everyone else lost their way. And in a twisted sense, he's technically not wrong. He is loyal, but not to his friends and not to himself. He's loyal to the system, to the hierarchy, to the machine that chews people up and spits them right back out. And the scary thing, it rewards him for it. Sam doesn't get killed like Polly. He doesn't get threatened like Tommy. He moves up. He gets closer to Salieri, gets more responsibility, more protection, because in this world, obedience looks a lot like honor from the outside. But here's the truth. Sam gave up everything that made him human a long time ago. There's nothing left under the surface. No doubt, no hesitation, just a job to do. When he tells Sammy this is the life we chose, it's not a threat, it's a resignation. He's not trying to win, he's just making sure nobody else escapes the wreckage. And maybe that line's the most honest thing anyone says in the entire story, because Sam's right. This was the life they technically chose, but what he doesn't see, what he can't see, is that honor doesn't mean dying for a cause that no longer serves you. Sometimes the only way to stay honorable is to disobey. Tommy figures that out. Polly never got the chance, but Sam, he never even asked the question to begin with. He thinks survival is virtue. That as long as he plays by the rules, he's doing the right thing, but the rules were never made to protect people like him. They were made to protect people like Salieri. And the second Sam starts being useful, he'll find that out the hard way. That's what makes Sam's betrayal hit so differently. It's not passionate, it's not messy, it's surgical. He doesn't kill Tommy out of anger. He does it because he believes he's supposed to. And that belief, that blind mechanical loyalty, is the most dangerous kind of dishonor there is. Because when you strip out doubt, you also strip out empathy. And once that's gone, you're just following orders. Even if they destroy the only real friendship you ever had. Sam survives longer than Polly. He keeps his position, he keeps his connections, but he loses something way more important. He loses his soul, and unlike Tommy, he never looks back to notice it's missing. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm horrible at transitioning from character to character. So, Don Sorelli carries himself like he's above it all. Like he's different. Not a thug, not a gangster, a businessman. When you first meet him, he's calm, measured. He offers Tommy a drink, not a threat. And that sets the tone for how you're supposed to see him. Not as a criminal, but as a gentleman. That's the trick. Because Sorelli sells you a version of the mob that feels noble, structured, orderly. He talks about the rules, about respect and family and honor. He presents himself as someone who protects the people under him. Someone who rewards loyalty, punishes betrayal, and believes in fairness. And if you're Tommy, if you're just some guy trying to survive, that is exactly what you want to hear. You want to believe that you're not working for a mob boss, you're working for a man with principles. But here's the problem. Salieri doesn't believe in any of that. He doesn't protect his own people. He owns them. And the rules, they only apply when it's convenient for him. At first it's subtle. You run errands, collect debts, but Salieri always framed it as justice. Like these people deserve it. They disrespected the family, they made poor choices, they broke the code. And that framing is important because it lets guys like Tommy sleep at night. If you can tell yourself it's justice, then maybe it's not murder. Maybe you're not a bad person. Maybe you're just a part of something bigger. But over time, the cracks show. You start getting orders that don't make sense. You start hurting people who didn't break the rules, and you realize that Salieri's code isn't moral. It's strategic. He doesn't care about honor. He cares about control. And the moment someone threatens that control, whether it's Morello, Frank, or Tommy himself, he flips. Instantly. Frank was his consigliere, loyal for years, kept the books, protected the operation, and the second Sorelli thinks Frank might talk, he puts out a hit. No hesitation. It doesn't matter that Frank was family. It doesn't matter that he was trying to escape, not betray. All that matters is that he stepped out of line. That's when Tommy starts to see Salieri for what he really is. Not a father figure, not a mentor, just another man who wraps cruelty in nice suits. There's this quiet sadness in the way Tommy talks about him later. You can tell it's not just disappointment, it's grief, because Salieri wasn't just a boss. He was someone Tommy actually believed in, and that belief is what makes the betrayal feel so personal. See, when Polly dies, it hurts. When Sam turns, it stings, but when Tommy realizes Salieri never cared about him, that hits him in a different way. Because it's not about business, it's not about rules, it's about the lie. The lie that honor meant something in this world, that loyalty could be rewarded, that dignity could survive under Blood Bunny, that if you just played the game right, you could stay human, but Salieri never cared about honor. He just needed you to believe in it, long enough to be useful. The game won't spell that out for you, it doesn't need to, you feel it. Every time Salieri gives one of those long, thoughtful speeches about respect and the family, you start to hear what's missing: compassion, accountability, and guilt. He's not guiding you, he's grooming you, turning you into a man who doesn't ask questions, a man who confuses silence with strength, and by the time you do start asking questions, it's already too late. Salieri doesn't argue, he doesn't beg, he just erases you, because in this world, you're either useful or you're gone. That's the illusion, that this man who presents himself like a king was really just another executioner in nicer shoes. And when you finally break from him, when Tommy walks away, not with a gun but with information, Salieri doesn't try to win him back. He tries to bury him, because nothing threatens power like someone who remembers where their soul is buried. Salieri survives the story, but he doesn't really win. Tommy got out, but Salieri, he'll die surrounded by men who only pretend to respect him, and that might be a worse fate. In a world where everything feels fake, the honor, the loyalty, the rules, Sarah is the only thing that feels real. She's not part of the mob, she's not chasing status or control, she doesn't speak in metaphors or threats, she just is, simple and present. And for Tommy, that's everything. Sarah shows up early in the story, but she's not in a romantic subplot. She's what Tommy's fighting for, even if he doesn't know it yet. The mob gives him money, gives him power, gives him a role, but Sarah gives him something else entirely. A reason not to become like the rest of them. When Tommy walks her home, that quiet, simple mission, it's the first time you see him act without obligation. He's not following orders, he's not chasing a payout, he's just being human. There's a warmth there, not in what's said, but in what's not said. He listens. She's nervous, he's careful. There's a mutual gentleness in the way they exist around each other. Everything else in this is transactional. You give something to get something. You do a job, you get paid. You stay loyal, you stay alive. But Sarah doesn't want anything from Tommy except the version of him that existed before the mob, and that's what makes her the most dangerous person in his life. Not because she threatens him, but because she reminds him. She reminds him what he's losing, what he used to care about, what it feels like to be touched by something pure in a world built on compromise, and Tommy tries to protect that. He really does. He builds a wall between his work and his relationship, tries to leave the violence at the door, tries to be two different people depending on the hour, but that can't last. It never does. From that point on, Sarah stops being background. She becomes a quiet pulse behind every decision Tommy makes, every doubt he feels, every line he doesn't want to cross, every moment he thinks about walking away. It all comes back to her. It's not because she's pressuring him, but because she believes he can be better. And when no one else in your life expects anything from you except obedience, that kind of belief is terrifying. Sarah isn't there to save Tommy. She doesn't need to be. She just represents a version of life where he isn't looking over his shoulder, where he isn't haunted by names he can't say out loud. And that's what makes the ending hurt more, because in the final moments of the game, Tommy's living that life. White picket fence, kids, peace, but it's borrowed time. He's not safe, he's just quiet. And deep down, he knows it. Because no matter how far you run, you can't outpace the decisions that built your new life. Tommy doesn't die because he betrayed the mob, he dies because he tried to change, because he chose to raise his daughter instead of running forever. And when the hit finally comes, when they call his name, he doesn't beg, he doesn't fight, he just looks at him and accepts the cost of peace he tried to build. That's the difference between him and everyone else. Tommy knew he was already a dead man. He just wanted to buy enough time for someone else to live better, and that's the most honorable thing anyone in the story ever really does. Every criminal enterprise says it runs on rules. No drugs, no hurting women or children, respect the hierarchy, protect the family, and most importantly, stay loyal. But those rules are only sacred when they serve the people at the top. And in Mafia, you start to notice how flimsy the code really is. The deeper Tommy goes, the more those rules start to shift. They stretch, they disappear. Because at the end of the day, the mob doesn't run on honor, it runs on utility. The second someone stops being useful, the code stops applying. Look at Frank, Salieri's right-hand man. He kept the books, managed the business, never stepped out of line. He was loyal, but then his family gets threatened. He panics, tries to run, and what's the reward for a lifetime of service? A hit, just like that. Tommy's sent to do it, of course, because that's what the job is now. Kill the people you used to respect, because the moment they stop being useful, they become liabilities. But something happens. Tommy doesn't do it. He lets Frank live, lets him disappear with his wife and kid, because no matter what Salieri says, Tommy still believes there's a line. He's clinging to a version of the code that the rest of the family abandoned a long time ago, and you can tell that choice haunts him. Not because he regrets it, but because he knows it's going to cost him. And he's right, because when the cracks show, they don't stop. They eat away at everything that used to feel solid. Next, you see it with the prostitute, another no-go zone. The mob doesn't hurt women, right? Except they do. They just pretend they don't, so they can feel righteous while doing awful things. The mob's code is PR. It's a story they tell themselves so they can pretend they're better than the street thugs. But thugs with rules are still thugs, and the rules only protect the powerful. Morello breaks the code when it suits him. Salieri pretends not to, but the end result is the same. People die. And the tragedy is, Tommy doesn't see this coming all at once. He watches the cracks one at a time. He tries to fix them, to believe the system can be saved, but it can't. Because there's never a real code to begin with, only control. The Don makes the rules, and the Don changes them. And when he does, you either obey or disappear. The mob doesn't ask for honor, it demands submission. And that's what breaks Tommy slowly, because he thought he joined a world with structure, a world that respected boundaries, respected him. But what he actually joined was a machine that uses you until you hesitate, then crushes you for hesitating. And that's the paradox of Mafia. You're told that honor means following orders, but the longer you do that, the further you get from anything honorable. Tommy starts seeing the world clearly around this point. The jobs stop feeling clean, the debts feel dirtier, the money doesn't spend the same, because once you know the rules don't protect everyone, you start wondering if they protected anyone, and the truth is, they didn't. Tommy isn't quiet anymore, not after Frank, not after Polly. He starts to realize the game was rigged from the beginning, not because he was dumb, but because he trusted the story, the myth of the honorable gangster. But here's the reality. There's no honor among thieves, and there's no safety and structure when the structure is built on fear, so now he's stuck. That's the breaking point. Not a single moment, but a slow, painful recognition. You can't can't follow a code that never meant anything, and you can't stay loyal to rules that only exist when it's your turn to die. Now, to go and loop back around, you open the door to Polly's place and everything kind of stops. No music, no warning, no build up. He's already gone, lying there in his apartment like the world just forgot about him. No gun in his hand, no fight, just the aftermath. And somehow that makes it worse, because Polly didn't deserve to go out like this. He was reckless, sure, but he was loyal. He believed this thing meant something. Maybe not the mob itself, but the people in it. Sam, Tommy, Salieri, the crew. And maybe that belief made him stupid, but it also made him human. He trusted too easily and he paid for it. Tommy doesn't truly get a moment to sit with it. There's not really any time to react. He sees the blood, the body, the mess, and then he goes to meet Sam. And even though he knows something's wrong, he goes anyways. That he can take the money and leave. That there's some version of life where this doesn't end with another dead friend, but Sam's already made his choice. There's no negotiation, barely a conversation, just a man doing what he's told. Polly was step 1, Tommy step 2. That's how fast a family works when you stop being useful. It doesn't matter what you've done, and it doesn't matter what you've survived. If you make them nervous, you're off the board. And it hits hard because there's no honor in how it happens. He bled on hardwood, alone. Tommy doesn't cry. He doesn't beg. He just walked out of the apartment, knows that everything's collapsing, and that now, finally, he's really alone. That money, it doesn't mean anything anymore. It was never about the money anyways. It was about getting free, about saving something that mattered. Now, he's just trying to get out alive. The game really starts at the end. Two men sit across from each other in a quiet diner. One of them is Tommy Angelo, the other, Detective Norman. And what you're hearing for the next 10 hours of story isn't nostalgia, it's leverage. Tommy's not here to unburden his soul. He's here to make a deal. He knows how this works. The cops don't protect people like him unless they got something back. So, he gives them everything. Names, routes, schedules, the books, how Salieri built the business, who handled the money, where the bodies are buried, literally, every detail he can recall. There's no illusion of redemption here. Tommy's not pretending he's innocent, he just wants out. And he's smart enough to know the only way out is through the police. So he sits in that booth, calm but recounting, careful not to sound too desperate. He's dealt with men like Norman before, men who smile while they're doing you a favor, men who think they understand what it costs to live like this. But Norman's different. He's not gloating and he's only partially judging, but he really just wants the truth, and that's what Tommy gives him. Or at least enough of it to make himself valuable. As he talks throughout the game, you can feel the years on him, the exhaustion, the quiet paranoia under every sentence. He's been waiting for this chance for a long time, and he knows it's probably his last, because once you turn on the family, you don't get second chances. There's no hiding forever. So this conversation isn't just about survival, it's about buying peace and it's about buying time. He tells Norman he's done with that life. He has a wife, a daughter, he just wants them to live normal lives. No more running, no more guns, no more waiting for the next knock on the door. And Norman can see it. The sincerity, the fear, the truth that Tommy's not asking to be a free man, he's asking to be forgotten, so they strike a deal. Norman gets the story, the evidence, the confession, and Tommy gets a way out. New name, new address, a clean slate, at least on paper. But you can hear it in his voice, even then. He knows it won't last because you can't erase what you did. You can't rewrite what people remember, and the mob never forgets. That dinner conversation is supposed to be his way out, but deep down, it's just the moment he finally stops running. Not because he's free, but because he's out of moves. And as he gets up from that booth, you can almost feel the clock start ticking again. So, Tommy ends up getting his deal. New life, new town. The cops do their part. They relocate him, bury the paperwork, and erase what they can. It's not perfect, but it's enough for a while. And for a minute, you believe it. That maybe the story ended with that last conversation in the diner. That maybe Tommy actually found peace, but it never really leaves him. The tension, the silence behind every closed door, the feeling that someone might just be watching, even when no one's there. He knows this won't last forever. People like him don't get forever, just fragments. And in the end, it's two men with calm voices and steady hands. They walk up, say his name, that's it. It's been years, maybe even decades, but they remembered. That's the rule. You can flip on the mob, you can vanish, you can start a new life with a new name, but they only need to find you one time. And when they do, you don't get a warning, you get a moment. Tommy doesn't resist, he doesn't scream, he doesn't plead. He tells them who he is, and they do what they came to do. It's quiet, almost respectful, because the family isn't angry, they're just finishing something. A debt's a debt, and Tommy knew he was due. He never gave up, he never tried to crawl back, he never even reached out for help. He lived his life the only way he could, with the guilt, with the fear, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could raise his kid without all of it landing on her. That's what makes the story different. He didn't die chasing more power, he died trying to protect what little good he had left. He couldn't undo the past, but he tried to shield someone from it. And in a world where every other man got swallowed whole by greed or violence or really even both, that does mean something. Tommy didn't win, but he didn't lose the way they did either. He faded out on his own terms. No spotlight, no grand exit, one last morning, one last name, one final choice that wasn't about him. Okay, so for a second, I want to do a really hard pivot. I want to talk about the actual gameplay for a second, because for how serious and emotionally heavy Mafia is, it kind of plays like a game that's allergic to itself. The gunplay, it's bad, just straight up bad. You feel like your character has never held a gun before. The aim is so floaty and weird, especially on controller, and the game knows this because it quietly forces you to use aim assist just to function. But even then, it still feels shaky. Not in a tense and immersive kind of way, more like you're fighting both the enemy and the analog stick. Enemies never react cleanly. Cover systems are extremely janky. There's input delay baked into almost everything. And every time you get into a shootout, there's this moment where you'll start thinking, oh right, I forgot this part of the game kind of sucks. And the driving, it is a bit better, but it's still weirdly stiff. Turning feels like you're steering a tank full of bricks, and the brakes always react if you press them a full second too late. It's not unplayable, but it's extremely clunky, and it feels super sluggish. Like the game was never trying to be about precision or power fantasy, it's almost intentionally awkward. The remaster didn't fix this at all. It looks great, the lighting, the character models, the animations during cutscenes, all looks amazing. But the actual feel of the game is still locked in this weird place between cinematic ambition and B-tier third-person mechanics. You'll walk into a mission, hyped from the story, you'll be locked in emotionally, and then you get stuck on a railing or die because the aiming system refused to recognize someone literally 5 feet in front of you, and yet somehow this kind of works in the game's favor. Not because bad mechanics are good, but because they force you to engage with Mafia differently. It's not a game you rush through. You don't sprint and shoot like you're playing Uncharted or Grand Theft Auto. You move slowly. You line up shots like it's your actual last bullet, and half the time it kind of is, but you also drive like you're scared of what happens if you crash, and in a strange way, that discomfort starts feeding the atmosphere. The clunkiness reinforces the tension, not by design, let's be honest, but through accident. You're not this unstoppable machine mowing people down. You're a guy in a suit holding a revolver with both hands like he's praying it doesn't jam. You feel out of your depth, and in this story that kind of fits. The mechanics definitely don't enhance the game, but they accidentally echo the world. A world where violence isn't clean, power isn't stable, and control is always just barely out of reach. It definitely doesn't justify the roughness. Frame drops, wonky collisions, the occasional mission that just bugs out completely, but it does remind you that this isn't a story where you're supposed to feel like the hero. And by the time you're done, you almost forget how many times the aim system screwed you over because you're still thinking about what happened at that diner, or what Tommy gave up, or how none of this was ever going to end well. The story is what you remember, not the mechanics, and maybe that says everything about the game. If there's one word everyone in this game seemingly throws at you without ever agreeing on what it actually means, it's honor. They all think they understand it. They all think they're living by it, but none of them mean the same thing when they say it. For Zarelli, honor is control. It's respect, not earned, enforced. He believes he's the kind of man who does things the right way, not like Morello, not sloppy, not reckless, but the sense of order. It's just a mask. Because the second someone steps out of line, he doesn't try to bring them back, he full-on erases them. Loyalty to him is only sacred when it keeps the hierarchy intact. Once you challenge it, you're a threat, not a brother. Sam thinks honor is obedience. He doesn't question orders, he doesn't second guess the life, he convinces himself that following the rules, even when it means killing someone he's called a friend, is the only way to survive with your soul intact. But that's not honor, that's submission. Frank believes in honor until it threatens his family. Then he runs, and honestly, that's probably the most human thing anyone in the game does. He finally realizes the code isn't built to protect people, it's built to control them. And then Polly believes in you. Not in the code, not in the hierarchy, in the people next to him. He believes that if you stick together, you can get through anything, even when the jobs get bloodier, even when the boss gets colder. But that trust, that blind loyalty, is what gets him killed. Because in this world, believing in the wrong thing for too long isn't noble, it's dangerous. Sarah's version of honor is the only one that's truly grounded in anything real. She just wants Tommy to make it out. She wants stability, a quiet home, a safe place to raise her daughter. And Tommy's definition of honor changes. He starts out thinking it means holding your head high, being respected, being useful, keeping your nose clean while everyone else is doing dirty work. Then he starts thinking maybe it's about protecting the people close to you, doing bad things but for a good reason, trying to find that 1 inch of moral ground that isn't soaked in blood. And then by the end he realizes that in this world, honor is just a story that people tell themselves to sleep at night. It doesn't keep you safe, it doesn't save the people you care about, and it surely doesn't stop the bullets from coming. Every character in Mafia believes in honor, every single one of them, and every single one of them gets destroyed by it. Not because honor is bad, but because they each chase a version of it that was never real to begin with. They inherit this old world idea of what it means to be a man, to be strong, respected, and feared. But nobody ever tells them the cost. Nobody ever tells them what happens when the people giving the orders don't believe in the code themselves. So they cling to it, they die for it, and if they're lucky, someone remembers their name afterwards. But most of the time they end up like Polly, alone, forgotten, a warning, not a legacy. Tommy tries to rewrite that ending. He tries to leave something behind that isn't just blood and regret, and that's where we'll end, with what he does leave behind and whether or not it means anything at all. Tommy dies in his front yard, old, unarmed, quiet. And if you only watch the scene in isolation, you might think it's the end of a tragedy, but it isn't. It's the end of a choice. Because when he turned on the family, when he sat down at that dinner and gave the cop everything, he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to buy a future he'd never get to live in, one where his wife and daughter could go grocery shopping without ever looking over their shoulders, one where nobody knew the name Sorelli, one where violence stopped chasing them, and somehow it worked. Sarah survives. His kids grew up safe. The mob didn't forget Tommy, but they did leave his family alone, and maybe that's the legacy. Not the jobs, not the betrayals, not even the testimony. It's a quiet life someone else got to have because Tommy made the deal he did. That's the part that'll stick with you, because this isn't a game about a man who beat the system. It's about a man who lost everything and still tried to carve out something good from the wreckage. And yeah, he does die. Of course he does. Everyone in the story does. But he doesn't die in a back alley or a warehouse or behind the wheel of a getaway car. He dies as a father, as a husband, as someone who finally made peace with the idea that maybe he didn't have to be remembered, as long as the people he loved got to forget. That's the price of honor. Not a code, not a rule book, not some gangster philosophy. It's what you give up so someone else doesn't have to. And when we look at it that way, Tommy might be the only one in the entire story who actually figured out what honor meant. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands respect or power, the kind that's quiet, that walks away, that chooses to lose so someone else gets to live. That's not redemption, it's not justice. It's something smaller, but maybe more important. It's grace.